the buyer power, which has been quite famous topic for the decades. So the buyer power and supplier welfare relationship has been discussed for decades. But the findings of prior studies are mixed. Some studies provide a positive connection between buyer power and supplier welfare, while other studies provide negative connections. In this study, we focus on the negative connection, particularly buyers illegitimate actions toward a supplier, which we called buyer abusive behavior, BAB for short. And I believe focusing on the negative side has been becoming popularity these days, especially in the era of corporate social responsibility. So given that, particularly we examine this negative phenomena in the context of trucking. For reasons why we chosen trucking industry is that there are many arguments, especially from practitioners, that we should stop squeezing our truck drivers like lemons, because this kind of pressure drives down the truckers' profit margin, while at the same time diminishing the road safety. So when safety issue like crash on the road occur, it means damaging not only the truck owner operator, but also supply chain, member, society, community, all of those who are linked to that trucking operation. And trucking is also relevant, that these days platform logistics that is now emerging as a new business model in supply chain. And such online platforms generate benefits such as cost efficiency, so on and so forth, but also subject to drawbacks potentially associated with BAB. So that is the flexibility of contractual arrangements would give buyers another power source to exploit workers like, truck owner operators. So given this, we believe that our topic is quite timely and necessary. This is the background of the study. In order to talk about the research paper, we probably need to understand the background of BAB, which I believe Sangho can explain.
So we wanted to draw clear distinction between our BAB concept from the concept of coercive power, which has been studied quite extensively in the supply chain literature. We wanted to highlight this illegitimate use of coercive power with our BAB concept, because the existing literature on coercive power, they tend to focus on, they don't necessarily identify whether the buyer actually engages in coercion, and if so, whether or not the coercion is legitimate. So by creating this new concept of BAB, we wanted to focus on illegitimate buyer behaviors that are coercive. And because this coercion can abuse specific contract terms or violate even more serious, far-reaching commercial and criminal laws, we decide to divide the BAB concept into two different but related constructs. So first one is the contract-related BAB, and the second one is contract unrelated BAB. And we considered contract unrelated BAB a more serious violation of the relationship between buyer and supplier.
So based on that, let me share one screen slide. So this is, hypothesis development, summary. So as Sangho mentioned, we newly developed the concept of BAB based on coercive power and contract-related BAB, as he mentioned, one of the sub-dimension of BAB, which is including, for example, unfair subcontract price decision and unprovoked delays in payment and so on and so forth. So all of them are related to contract when they make a contract with supplier. And contract unrelated BAB is including like requesting money for money and valuables and unwarranted interference in management. So all of these are not quite related to contract. So based on this distinction, we argue that contract and contract related and contract unrelated BAB has a negative association with supplier performance and supplier safety. So altogether supplier welfare. That's our first and second hypothesis. This is basically, based on the logic of prospect theory. So saying that individuals with low performance generally tend to take risks with great expected value. So when truck owner operators, what we see them as a supplier, under lower performance when compared to their average fellow, they try to make up for the losses by taking some risk. That's how BAB can be negatively associated with supplier performance and supplier safety. Our third hypothesis is the association between supplier's performance and supplier safety. And on top of that, we further developed the last hypothesis saying that BAB has negatively moderates the relationship, the positive relationship between supplier performance and supplier safety. So indeed, BAB is really, damaging concept to supplier welfare. So by the way, this is survey based. We surveyed 260 individual truck owner operators in South Korea by doing the face-to-face survey interview, and we conducted a couple of analyses like integration analysis and some other additional tests. And as a result, we found that contract unrelated BAB and negatively associated with supplier performance and supplier safety. As you can see here in this lead, the minus values in lead. And a positive relationship between supplier performance and supplier safety is also supported. It should be blue, by the way, but you can see that the plus value. And interestingly, as we expected, BAB negatively moderates the positive relationships, which is our fourth A hypothesis. But for contract unrelated BAB, we found the positive moderation effect, which we believe a very counterintuitive finding. This is a summarize of our findings.
About the unexpected finding of the contract unrelated BAB's effect, moderation effect. In the discussion, we explained this unexpected finding with threat rigidity thesis, which suggests that when people are faced with threat to survival, individuals experience psychological stress and anxiety and tend to restrict information processing, so they can reduce their risk-taking behavior even when the it can decrease the expected economic return. So that's how we conjecture this diverging moderation effect of contract related versus unrelated BAPs can happen.
So our findings, we believe that contribute to the United Nations sustainable development goal, because one goal there is to achieve a decent work for all workers, which is to protect basic labor rights such as fair income and safety working conditions. So we uncover that BAB is a significant detriment to achieving decent work, as both contract-related and contract-unrelated BAB damage worker performance and safety. Especially the detrimental issue by contract-unrelated BAB is so pronounced that it can threaten the survival of truck owner operators as service supplier. So in that sense, we also believe that this kind of safety issues, such as crash on the road, can relate to supply chain disruptions as well, which we believe another practical contribution. And lastly, our findings, suggest importance of mitigating BAB. And then for this kind of issue, already a lot of policymakers and practitioners have been doing something, but most of these attempts rely on the market-based. One example is to introduce on-demand matching platform, but contrary to expectations, such app-based service is found to make the subcontracting chain even more complex, driving down the freight rate even further. So unexpected negative effect by that effort. Relatedly, a recent study reveals that attempts to improve safety at workplace actually hinder organizational survival. So that is, if there are incentives to ignore the safety, such market-based measure do not work. So that kind of discussion suggests that instead of relying on the market-based measure, maybe it is time to rethink about our current institutional things. So that means the industry needs institutional change to complement the limited effect of the market-based measure. This is one last implications we believe to the practitioner.